I'll call the meeting to order, if I may. We do have quorum. Colleagues, we were thinking that perhaps we'd be interrupted by more procedural votes this afternoon. It doesn't appear that that's going to be the case, looking at what's been going on with routine proceedings. So I think we'll have an uninterrupted meeting from here until we adjourn. Minister Qualtrough, thank you for being with us today. My understanding, Minister, is that number one, you will be able to be with us until 5:30. Is that correct?
Correction, 5:45.
All right. Thank you very much. Secondly, the minister has agreed that we can go directly into questions if we have concurrence from this committee, so that I'm asking, does the committee agree that the minister's speaking notes be taken as read and appended to the evidence of today's meetings? We agreed. That would give us approximately 40 minutes then, colleagues. And if we went to the regular rounds of 7 and 5, we would not be able to get all questions in. Would we agree to going 5-minute questions?
Perfect.
For everyone? That'll just allow more committee members to ask questions. With that being said, and agreement being in hand, we would ask that the government, starting with Madame Mendez, start with our 5-minute round of questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being here. Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre. I think considering my ethnic origins, I'll go and take the bull by the horns and start with Phoenix and try to get from you, Minister, a sort of status report on what's been happening with the whole system, how the mitigating measures that have been taken are addressing the backlog, and what are your expectations, if you wish to, for the next 6 to 12 months?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And of course, thanks for having me here today and for having our officials here to answer your questions. We will, of course, endeavor, as always, to give you the best and most considerate answers we can. Phoenix. So I'm pleased to say that we continue to make progress on the Phoenix file. We have decreased, the backlog by about 209,000 cases since January of 2018, which represents about a third, a 33% reduction in the backlog in that time period. We've increased the number of people working at the Pay Center and in our regional offices to around 1,500 employees, plus an additional 200 employees working in the Client Contact Center. We now have, as of last Friday, transitioned all client departments serviced by the Pay Center to the PayPod model, which was, I was in Moncton for the last transition, and it was quite a significant accomplishment for our public servants. And I'm pleased to announce that the early pods, so Pod 0 and Pod 1, are at a 48% reduction in their respective client departments. So we are seeing results. Of course, as I've said many times to this committee, not as quickly as we would like. I would say that client and customer morale is up. Certainly public servant morale is up. I felt that firsthand last Friday in Moncton. So overall, we are seeing a steady decline. We are cleaning up files. The PayPods model is definitely proving to have been the special sauce, if you will, in getting taming this dragon.
Thank you very much, Minister. They are encouraging news, and let's hope it will continue that way. On the Federal Science and Technology Initiative, I'm somewhat bewildered about what it is, and if you could explain to us what are the objectives of this initiative, and how would we attract talent to participate in such an initiative, please?
So this is an initiative in partnership with ISED, so Economic Development and Science, obviously, to modernize both where public servants do science and how public servants exchange information related to science. So the idea that many of the facilities that our federal scientists use are antiquated, and aren't giving them the tools they need to do good science, nor the capacity to share information. It's a very antiquated model of science, for the lack of a better way of putting it. So we have endeavored, and we now have a deputy minister, or is it ADM? I apologize.
Associate Deputy.
Deputy Minister responsible for this initiative to modernize the facilities and to work with the science community, both inside the federal government and within academia and beyond, to basically revitalize how we do science and the science that's done within the government of Canada. I don't know if my deputy would like to add anything.
Thank you, Minister. The only thing I'd add is the starting point for this is around creating horizontal, more collaborative infrastructure that basically treats the laboratory space as a horizontal government-wide asset as opposed to department by department. So we're looking at more collaborative, innovative, modern, accessible laboratory space. But as the Minister said, it is the underpinning of a broader science strategy.
Does this?
Science today is increasingly about data, access to data, large data sets. So we are looking at the information technology to support the work in the labs. And science is often collaborative. So we're making sure that the federal scientists have the collaboration tools to work with international colleagues and partners. So there is, when we think about infrastructure, it's not just the physical infrastructure, but the IT infrastructure necessary for science of today.
Good to hear, because yes, I know that that is always an issue. But the
Thank you very
collaborative.
much. We've got about 15 seconds.
Oh, does this include the National Research Centers?
National Research Council.
Council, sorry, yes. Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm done.
The Honourable Rob Nicholson with us today. Good to see you, Mr. Nicholson, and thanks for putting your retirement plans on temporary hold. You have 5 minutes, sir.
I was going to retire yesterday, but I decided to have this opportunity here. Thank you, Minister Qualtrough, and those who are with you. Thank you for your attendance here today. As you're probably aware, there's quite a bit of discussion about the article that my colleague, Mr. McCauley, raised this matter with you. It's a journalist's question about a potential problem with the Royal Canadian Navy's new Arctic ships that prompted federal bureaucrats to generate more than 200 pages of documents as they warned Irving Shipbuilding about the news outlet's interest in the multi-billion-dollar program. Is that a standard thing? I mean, if somebody asks a question, you sort of tip off, or does somebody get a hold of there? I mean, in fact, the journalist, has put an access to information request in, and has not got. It's more than 30 days, which is outside the limit, and they can't seem to get any information. He's directed, even directed around not getting. I mean, do you find this concerning?
Absolutely. Perhaps I'll answer it in two parts, if you'll indulge me. The first part has to do with when we get a media request in the department and in my office, we need to verify. We want to make sure we give journalists the information that's accurate. So it is a common practice to reach out and verify what's been asked of us. What is not common practice is to share the confidential information of that journalist, and that is unacceptable. And I have apologized and certainly have directed both at the official level and within my own political staff that can't happen in the future. We also have no, and by design I would say this, we also have no role in access to information requests. That is a completely separate process outside of my my ministry, not my minister's office. As a by design, it's an effort I believe to be as, I think, neutral and objective in the culling of information. I wouldn't know who has made a request or the status of that request. What's, again, in this case, should have happened if that information wasn't available within the timeline is there should have been an extension granted, or a request for an extension, as I understand it. And Bill, perhaps you can help me with the process.
Thank you, Minister, Mr. Chair. And in terms of the deadline being missed, member raised the issue that the 30-day deadline was missed. He's quite right. The department has a window where it can ask for an extension, and we missed that window. So the opportunity for an extension was lost. The 30 days was not respected. The reason we missed the window is we discovered in the 200-some pages of documentation, which I'll come back to, some of it does belong to another department, which means we have to consult with the other department. And that's a perfectly legitimate reason for an extension, but we missed the window. So of the 200 pages, a lot of it is various headlines, news media, not what I would call real information. or new information inside the department. What's going to happen in the next couple of days? We will release the information that is PSPC specific, and then the information that is an exchange between ourselves and our colleagues at National Defence, as they have a role here. We'll get their consultation, and that will come later. So that's an update on that issue, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we'll see that in the next couple of days here. But in terms of releasing information to people, and the same article points out that, according to the article, last week the Office of Innovation Minister alerted Irving that Globe and Mail journalists had asked the department whether an investment in an Alberta French fry plant counted towards industrial benefits. As a result, the newspaper received a letter from an Irving lawyer threatening legal action if the article contained any allegations of improper conduct. I take it that must bother you as well. I mean, this is another example of a company or this being tipped off to do this. I mean, I think that the media has a right to ask these questions. And,
Oh, I think it's essential that the media ask these exact kind of questions. So it's a fundamental right. And again, that information. Well, this had to do with a specific ITB. Assignment of ITB value for a specific project. And again, it is legitimate for a department or a minister's office to reach out to a supplier or a partner to ensure that we are, getting the right information, especially if it's information maybe that's kind of brand new to us. And again, the error lies in having shared the personal information of that journalist, which again, I can't tell you what's happened in another department, but I can tell you in my department and within my own minister's office, we've taken quite significant steps since our error happened to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
well,
Sorry, we're out of time, Mr. Nicholson, but we will have another attempt. Mr. Blakey, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. On the question of Phoenix, I wanted to zero in on the departmental plan that suggests that EFTs in payments and accounting are going to drop approximately 53% between the 2019-2020 year and the 2020-2021 year. I know we've heard that the PayPod model has been pretty successful, and that part of the success in getting some of the claims with Phoenix under control has been staffing up appropriately. So why is it that the department is thinking it can tolerate a decrease of 53% in the payments and accounting workforce?
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. I think the context here is the funding that was received in budget 2019 for the department. Essentially, we are looking at operational funding for 1 year only, which will necessitate a return to the center for a budget request for budget 2020 to be able to sustain or perhaps enhance the number of staff that we have on strength.
If those staff are required on an ongoing basis, I mean, why wouldn't that just be part of a more kind of regular ask? Like, why would we be projecting a drop? I mean, you're going to, every year you come and ask for certain voted authorities. Mm-hmm. You don't project that you're going to lose all your staff if the vote doesn't happen. So why in this case would there be a projection of a staffing decrease in the departmental plan?
In this instance, I think it would be prudent in terms of understanding progress that is made on the queue when we might be in a position to in fact project a decrease. So we've been managing a lot of our hiring on a determinate basis, bringing in people on shorter term contracts of 6 months or a year, and then looking with the central agencies as part of the budget planning process each year where we will need to be over the course of the coming fiscal year.
Am I wrong that the departmental plan also talks about, training and retention has been one of the challenges in addressing the Phoenix issues? So how does the strategy of hiring people on short-term contracts and projecting the end of their position in the next fiscal year dovetail with the goal of increasing training and retention of the people that you do attract?
There's a certain amount of risk management associated with this, but at the same time, most of the people who are coming in to work on compensation are coming in at entry level, CR5, AS1, AS2 positions. And we know that grosso modo, there are opportunities across the public service for people with that kind of training. so that as departments mature or as Phoenix continues to stabilize, there will be opportunities for those folks to potentially off-ramp to other departments and agencies across the public service. So the training isn't lost; it's retained and sustained.
Yeah, I mean, are they not kind of encouraged to leave sooner rather than later, though? If they're on a short-term contract and the department's projecting that the position will be eliminated within 12 months?
Some may feel the need to move on if they have the opportunity for indeterminate positions, but also with a foot in the door, they can also apply through other competitive processes for indeterminate positions as well.
Now, when you talk in the departmental plan about IBM being tapped for technical and functional support in order to relieve the workload of public servants so that they can work on other things, if you're projecting a 53% decrease in the workload, that's not really freeing up public servants to do other work. That's engaging IBM on the one hand to do some of the work that public servants are doing right now, and then projecting that you're going to reduce your workforce by 53%. That sounds like contracting out the work that those folks are doing right now to IBM. It doesn't sound to me like freeing them up to do other work.
I think it's important to underline there are different skill sets that are brought to bear on HR to pay solutions. There are the compensation staff who work on files, but there are also a number of very skilled technical people who are working on the system, articulating business requirements that are then translated into technical change requests that are implemented in the system. And so what we have found with IBM is that by bringing on additional support with their help, we're able to free up some of the more technical staff who are then working on.
So how many of the staff that are working on Phoenix would be in that category of technical staff versus pay advisors?
I would have to get back through the clerk with the specific number, but it's in the hundreds.
Can I just, one point of clarification, it's not abnormal in the federal funding model to get year-by-year funding. Phoenix isn't the only file where you will see this sort of thing in the departmental plan, and you come back to refresh the resources year after year. So it's not out of the ordinary.
Long-term problem that's going to require a long-term fix, and that it's an important priority. So I mean, if you were going to convert funding to a more regular basis, this seems like a perfect candidate for something that would enjoy long-term sustained support as opposed to an ad hoc approach.
Mr. Peterson, you're up for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, and your team for being here today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Coast Guard ships to start off. I think the average age of the ship, I think, is older than everybody around this committee table, except for maybe the chair. But
Well, you're lucky, Mr.
Go right ahead.
anyway, suffice it to say they're nearing the end of their service life. So I just want to know what's the plan to ensure the Coast Guard is well equipped to continue to do the important work that Canadians rely on now and well into the future.
Thank you for the question. So as this committee is well aware, we have within the National Shipbuilding Strategy the capacity to do both combat and non-combat ships. When the original book of work was given to the successful shipyards on the west and east coast, the Coast Guard hadn't done the in-depth work it now has done to determine its long-term needs. Yes, these ships are very old, and as our Prime Minister has said, we don't want them to rust out. We have, with the average age being 38 years, you can know that there are some that are many years older than that. So what we did, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister announced a complete fleet renewal of the Coast Guard, with the first wave of that fleet renewal being up to 18 large ships with a value of approximately $15.7 billion, 16 of which are to be built at Seaspan as multi-purpose vessels, and 2 of which will be AOPS, or Object Offshore Patrol ships, at Irving. The benefit of having 2 AOPS as part of that mix is that the Coast Guard will get these ships 5 years earlier than if we went with 18 MPVs. And quite frankly, the kind of the technical capacity of AOPS is slightly different than MPVs. So again, it just adds to the fleet. As part of this announcement, we also announced that we will be looking to secure a 3rd yard within the NSS to help us get the Coast Guard the additional capacity it needs beyond what I've just spoken about. The Coast Guard has not announced what that will be, but from a PSPC perspective, we will be engaging in a competitive process to determine which yard that will be, and ensure that when the work is ready to be done and identified, that yard is prepared to do it.
Okay, thank you for that. And broader, just in the national shipbuilding strategy in general, what steps are in place to avoid any unnecessary production gaps, which of course slow down the delivery of delivery and effectively can cost Canadian the jobs that this shipbuilding strategy is supposed to do. So what measures are in place to keep these production gaps to a minimum?
Thank you. I'd say a couple of things. First of all, experts around the world, including our National Shipbuilding Advisor, have long identified that production gaps cost government or the people who are paying for ships money. We know that when a workforce tools down, it costs more money to tool them back up. And we also know that job loss is not good for a yard, both in terms of the workforce ability to have a living, and also in terms of the loss of the talent that will inevitably go elsewhere. So to address an identified production gap at Irving between AOP 6 and the commencement of the CSC build program, we have announced these two AOPs, which will be AOP 7 and 8, which will go to the Coast Guard. So the benefit of that, of course, is that AOP 7 and 8 are going to cost a lot less than AOPs 1 and 2. There are economies of scale and efficiencies from having been 7 and 8, and we don't have to wait for a MPV in order to get a Coast Guard a new ship quicker. So that's what's being done specifically at Irving. At C-SPAN, there's been a creative ability. And the caveat here, perhaps, Mr. Chair, is because we treat the National Shipbuilding Strategy as a program of work instead of a series of projects, we're able to move, if you will, the pieces around the chessboard quite nimbly and quite agilely, because it's not a kind of a sequential series of projects. We have a program of work that needs to be done, and we can look at the chessboard and decide who's best positioned to do it when and for the least amount of cost. So, for example, we did early blocking of some of the JSS work, which actually allows us to get ahead of the game on the JSS that was during a period in which C-SPAN needed the work. So it's quite an interesting chessboard to manage.
Thank you very much. Mr. McCauley, you have 5 minutes.
Minister, everyone else, thanks for being with us today. Welcome back. Minister, who is Charles Corkin? Courquin.
He's a shipbuilding guy, or is there a Phoenix guy? Sorry, he's Charles Corkin is I'm going to get his title wrong, so perhaps Les will correct me. But he's an IBM employee. Who's been advising us on Phoenix. Les, can you give more details because there's an important?
No, I'll go on.
Okay.
Was he based in your office?
No, he's based in London, England.
Okay, when he works out here, where is he working?
He's visited Canada about 5 times, Mr. Chair, and he provides advice to the minister and to me and my project team on our integrated work plan and the various projects of work that we've launched to support stabilization.
Solely toward Phoenix?
Yes.
Okay. What kind of advice has he given specifically? The reason I ask is IBM has, since you were appointed, has lobbied you directly 13 times. Since you were appointed, IBM's received over $250 million of sole source contracts for the Phoenix program, which they had a hand in, perhaps.
I would say that
up.
the work that he has performed has largely been to stress test the integrated plan that we've posted on our website and are advancing through the governance process. He has been to Miramichi twice to observe the operations there and to provide suggestions around opportunities to improve or to streamline some processes, but basically has been acting as a sounding board and reacting to.
Does he report generally directly to you, Mr.
In general, but to the minister as well.
I meet with him. I've met with him 4 times, I think, probably.
So, yeah.
And been advised of the other meetings. The other decisions I would say that relate to this were twofold. Back in January of last year, when I decided that we needed regular meetings with IBM senior leadership in order to hold them to better account for the things that were and were not being done. That resulted in a series of meetings in order
hold them to account for things that aren't being done. Why are we giving them $250 million in sole source contracts?
Because as I've said before at this committee, IBM is out of necessity a part of the solution to this situation. The the challenge for us and the requirement on us has been to hold them to greater account for the things they said they were going to do and that we need them to do in the future.
Yes, for people watching, do you not find it kind of awkward or perhaps irregular that a company that's directly lobbied you so often, you're mentioning we need to hold them accountable, but at the same time we're giving them $250 million just in the 2 years you've been there of untendered contracts, but at the same time we're holding them accountable. It sounds like I would like to be held accountable like that, to be receiving such gifts.
I see what you're saying, and I disagree with how you're framing it. I consider the meetings I've had with IBM over the past 2 years to be necessarily related to us holding them to greater account for their contractual obligations, to working with them to finding a solution on Phoenix. We could not move forward on stabilization without IBM at the table as a full partner on the solution. Any contractual relationships that have been entered into have been, again, directly a result of a need to stabilize this.
Right, I just want to move on. The PMO, we know through an ATIP, ordered a review of the integrity regime. Now, there was about 60 organizations consulted for the integrity regime, our process update. Only 3 private companies, 2 of them volunteered. We contacted them, volunteered to do it. Only one, which was SNC, was invited to participate in the integrity regime consultations. Of course, SNC Lavalin is the only company that's received an administrative leave from the integrity regime. So I'm just curious why SNC was brought into the consultations as really the only private company invited to join in on consultations.
To be honest, that's not my understanding of the facts, so I'll ask Bill to verify, but I think there was over 300 submissions.
From your own report,
right?
From your own report that you publish, listed the companies consulted, we went through, and actually got from your department the companies listed. There was about 63 that consulted on the integrity regime. Most of them were associations, only 3 private companies. We spoke to Bell and BMO, and they said, oh, yeah, we volunteered to do this, we saw this. Only SNC was invited. Only SNC is the only company that's received an administrative review granted by this government from the integrity regime. Does it not all seem a bit odd?
Can I maybe just...
Well, it's a great question, Mr. Matthews. We're completely out of time. What I will ask, however, as I always do with all of our witnesses, any questions asked by committee members that are unanswered in direct testimony, we would ask you to please deliver them through our clerk in writing. We would appreciate the answer to that question, but unfortunately, because of time constraints, particularly for the minister, we have to continue on. And now we'll go to Monsieur Drouin for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for everybody for being here. And I, as a National Capital Region Member of Parliament, I too have been getting a lot of calls with regards to Phoenix, and I think it's important to remind the facts that it wasn't you, Minister, who issued the contract for IBM. It was these guys over there, and one of the members was sitting at the cabinet table. I think it's important to remind Canadians that, yes, we have to deal with IBM, but when you buy a Mazda, you have to go to the Mazda dealer. You don't go to Ford to get it fixed. And I think we're stuck with having to deal with IBM, despite the warnings that they had given at the time. And I just think it's important to remind those who are suffering under Phoenix about the facts at hand. Madame la Ministre, Madame Minister,
there's an important issue when it comes to our public servants. Many travel to Ottawa. I come the river, my region. I come from the region, rather. My riding is all along the river, and some public servants come to work in Ottawa or in Gatineau. Traffic jams are a major problem. We always wonder what's happening with the bridge. We saw with the recent flooding that the Chaudière Bridge was closed. This had an impact on traffic, created more traffic jams. The last bridge built is near my area in Hawkesbury. Could you please give us an update on what's happening with the bridges? Thank you for the question.
A demonstrated need for an additional crossing in the NCR region. And we also, as a government, have responsibility to build and maintain interprovincial crossings. So with that in mind, in Budget 2019, we signaled an intention to address this in a number of ways. So we're going to be refreshing existing studies. So we know that there have been some very good studies done, but we need to make sure that they remain up to date and that the information remains relevant. We're going to develop what we're calling an integrated provincial crossing plan, and we're going to replace the Alexandria Bridge. So those are the three kind of pillars of our plan around the NCR bridges. We're working with our partners, including, as you can appreciate, the City of Ottawa, the City of Gatineau, the two provinces. There's a bunch of players at these tables. And in the meantime, of course, we have to continue with our rehabilitation work on the Chaudière and the existing Alexandria Bridge. So a lot is going on, and we're very excited that that this is finally happening for our region, for your region.
It's an issue where it's been talked a lot or avoided, and I think it's an issue that has an impact directly on our not only our public servants but those who work on in either provinces. One of the other issues that has an impact on the National Capital Region is the modernization of our heating and cooling plants. And just wondering, I know there was an announcement made, and could you update this committee on what it is that we're planning on doing with this particular heating plant?
Thank you. So for some time now, we've been working to modernize our energy services in government buildings. So what we're looking to do is use electric power for cooling and low temperature hot water for heating instead of the very hot water that's kind of heating our buildings right now. So what we announced recently was a $1.1 billion investment in capital and a $1.7 billion in operations over the next 23 years, 25 years? 23 years to completely reduce, I think it's a 60% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in over 80 buildings located in the National Capital Region. So this is a privatization of these services, and we have been working with unions and public servants who are impacted to ensure that there's no job loss associated with this. There has been a workforce transition committee. What is it called? I apologize. That's what it's called? Something like that. I apologize. That's the name of the committee. But we've worked really hard to make sure we're doing this in a respectful way while at the same time taking advantage of new technology to heat an entire region.
Great. Thank you.
Last 5-minute intervention, Mr. Qualtrough. Once again, thank you for extending your time with us till 5:35, and that last intervention will come from Mr. McCauley.
Thanks. I want to go back to Irving. Now, they've claimed a $40 million credit that we know about for the French fry factory under the ITB. Now, the ITB policy specifically states that it's to ensure Canada's significant investment in defense-related goods and services. So I have to ask, how does crediting Irving for French fry contribute to our defense industry and our R&D capabilities? And I have to ask, is there some unknown French fry or potato capability gap that we're not aware of that we have to invest in?
Thank you for the question. So as again, committee members are aware, the ITB policy is it's our main tool for leveraging defense procurement for the benefit of the Canadian economy. There are arrangements made with successful suppliers who ultimately provide the goods to give dollar for dollar benefit to the Canadian economy. These benefits can be direct or they can be indirect. And I think maybe, is it Michael or Andre? Would you rather give?
But I just want to go back. It specifically states the ITB policy ensures Canada's significant investment in defense-related goods and services. How are French fries defense-related goods and services or R&D?
I also understand that the policy allows us to look at the level of technology within a given plant and if it's the same or higher level of the technology within the main contract itself, it can be credited. And it's not a dollar for dollar credit. So while this was
Let me ask, do you believe it's a valid use of the ITB to give them a $40 million ITB credit for French fries?
I personally believe that in a multi-billion-dollar procurement,
it's a yes or no question.
I'm going to flesh out my answer if you'll give me
for a hamburger manufacturing plant for $40 million. Would you allow that?
I think good
ITB?
technology jobs are good technology jobs, and these are well-paying jobs, and they are not to be diminished because they're working with significant technology that is at par or higher than the technology used in our defense procurement.
I'm pleased there's something going on in Alberta from the government. However, I don't think the ITB was meant for that. Would you be able, not now, would you be able to provide to this committee a list of all the ITB credits granted in the last couple of years for Irving, C-SPAN, and all of our defense spending?
That would be an ISED question. We don't, that's not within our, we don't track that. When we design a process, we don't track the.
So you won't provide it for us?
I don't know if I can I don't know if I can get it. I apologize. I'm not meaning to be difficult, but can we?
We can try, but I think your
I'm not
questions
sure we can obligate another department, but I'm not sure
equally
procedurally.
on the details of the policy are more appropriately directed to ISED as well, but we'll do what we can.
Okay. I want to go back to the integrity regime. Now, CTV, last time we spoke about this in committee, you promised it would have been out a couple months ago. CTV has now announced that it's going to be delayed. I have to ask, why is it going to be delayed? CTV has commented that by delaying it, it is going to benefit one company currently under the administrative review, which is SNC. So why the delay?
Well, as you can appreciate, when I was here the last time, our intention was, based on the feedback from our consultation last fall, so the fall of 2018, to, having been in the process at that point of reviewing that information, to have our report out or have our changed policy, I apologize, out within weeks. Given the considerable public discussion and the I would say the ton of feedback subsequent to that, we've decided that it's prudent to look at what else has come in and postpone a decision on what we'll do with the integrity regime.
Okay. When will the report be out?
I don't think we've got. We haven't committed. I apologize to the exact, but we're still a significant additional feedback has come in, and we're looking at that seriously.
From who?
If I could
and I have to ask, like, what other companies besides SNC are currently under corruption charges that would benefit from the delay or from the IR?
Mr. Chair, maybe just one thing. When the government does contemplate changes to such a policy, the norm would be to actually go back and consult publicly if there are significant changes. So that's depending on what is recommended.
Consult with SNC as well, since you invited them to consult the first time around?
You have mischaracterized, Mr. Chair, the meetings with SNC Lavalin. They were respective of the actual administrative agreement that is in place with them as opposed to the policy specifically. But we will confirm that in writing after this meeting.
That you're consulting with them as well in the second round?
When the government consults on a policy, it's done so in a public fashion.
Are you consulting
Anyone
with
is free
SNC
to
again on the second round?
They would.
I think Mr. Matthews has heard the question. The question is valid, but we do require an answer. But unfortunately, because of time constraints, I would ask you to provide that through the clerk in writing. And any other information that you feel would be relevant to the line of questioning, if you could provide that through the clerk as well, I would appreciate it greatly. Thank you very much. Minister, once again, thank you for your appearance. I know you had to adapt and alter your schedule somewhat to be here, so we do appreciate your appearance. Colleagues, we are suspended for a few moments. We will resume, hopefully in about 5 minutes, with Minister Murray. We are suspended. Colleagues, if I get you to take your seats, please. Thank you, colleagues. Colleagues, the minister has informed me that she will be available until 6:30. It's a hard deadline at 6:30. I understand she has to get out of here no later than that. So we'll try and abide by that. But I also understand, Minister, you have an opening statement of approximately 10 minutes in length. Is that correct?
Or a little less, yeah.
Okay, if it's, let's assume it's 10 minutes, that would allow us about 40 minutes worth of questions. Could we go back to the routine that we've established with the first round of witnesses, 5-minute questions? If we do it 5 minutes, we should be able to get 2 full rounds. All right. Thank you once again, Minister. Welcome back to our committee. The first time you were here, unfortunately, we're interrupted by procedural votes, so it's good to see you back before this committee. Would you care to introduce the officials with you and then deliver your opening statement, please?
Okay, Monsieur le Président, j'aimerais remercier.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank the committee for having invited me a second time to talk about the main estimates 2019-2020.
Committee as President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Digital Government. So it's a great honor to be here in that capacity, and I enjoyed my time here as a parliamentary secretary over the years before. So I'm pleased to have with me some officials from my department, Peter Wallace, Secretary of the Treasury Board, Secretariat, Karen Cahill, Assistant Secretary and Chief Financial Officer, and Glenn Purvis, Assistant Secretary, Expenditures Management Sector. I'd also like to highlight the presence here of Greg Fergus, the Parliamentary Secretary for the Treasury Board, President and Minister of Digital Government. After my remarks, my officials and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Mr. Chair, on April 11th, I tabled the 2019-2020 main estimates, which provide information on $300 billion in spending to deliver programs and services this fiscal year. This includes new measures announced in the federal budget. These main estimates are made up of $126 billion in planned voted expenditures and $174 billion in statutory expenditures. And they detail the government's plan to support the middle class as presented in Budget 2019, including historic investments in housing, skills training, and our most vulnerable seniors. This is the second year in a row that the main estimates include measures announced in the budget, and we have been able to do this in part by tabling the main estimates in mid-April after the budget. As you all know, this new sequencing is part of a 2-year pilot initiative that was put forward by this committee to make it easier for Canadians and parliamentarians to track government spending. Nous avons lancé ce projet pilote.
We launched this pilot project when we tabled the main estimates last year. Main estimates in which we presented expenditures having to do with all measures and all departments announced in Budget 2018 under one central vote, budget implementation vote 40. This allowed us to increase transparency and to completely harmonize budget main estimates items. Nevertheless, parliamentarians, including members of this committee, told us that they wanted a greater oversight and wanted new expenditures having to do with budget initiatives to the relevant parliamentary committees.
Between the main estimates and the departmental plans. As you know, Mr. Chair, our government greatly respects the work of parliamentary committees, and with this year's main estimates, we've responded to these concerns and other feedback from the Parliamentary Budget Officer. We've also implemented some changes to this year's main estimates following this committee's excellent report on the estimates reform process. What we have provided parliamentarians, what you're considering today, is the result of our ongoing work to better align the budget, the main estimates, and the departmental plans. This year's main estimates include all of the $6 billion in new voted measures announced in Budget 2019. They are presented in 194 separate measure-specific votes listed under individual departments. These votes have been referred to the appropriate parliamentary committees, that is, the committees that normally review a department's work. And because they are presented as individual votes, this new mechanism provides more detail and granularity for tracking and oversight than ever before. In his April 29th report to Parliament on the main estimates, the PBO described these new measures as, in quote, important improvements to the process. In addition, committee reviews of these measure-specific votes is being supported by supplementary information provided to Parliament at the end of April. And this is information that could not be included in the departmental plans for timing reasons, which were well advanced when the budget was announced, and they were also tabled on the same day as the main estimates. Par ailleurs, le gouvernement...
Further, the government will continue to provide detailed reports online on monies allocated to individual votes and appropriations, as well as interim reports in the supplementary estimates 2019-2020. The first of these reports is already available online, and I'm very proud to note that.
94 measure-specific votes provides clear linkages between Table A2.11 in the budget plan to the main estimates and to the departmental plans, taking into account the supplementary information provided at the end of April. Mr. Chair, this is about the ongoing and continuous improvement of the estimates process. We've come a long way from 2 years ago when there was no alignment between the budget and main estimates. And I'd like to remind the committee that we are working to improve on a system we inherited that the Globe and Mail, prior to our reforms, said was bad to the point of absurdity. As the PBO noted in his report, in summary, it is clear the government has taken steps to improve the estimates process from the previous year. However, there are still changes which could be made to further improve parliamentarians' oversight in scrutinizing government spending. Nous avons toujours dit que les Canadiens et les parlementaires.
We've always said that Canadians and the parliamentarians who represent them are entitled to know how public monies are spent and are entitled to ask the government to account for these expenses, this spending, and reforms will continue along these lines. By establishing these links, the government will act in such a way as to make sure that parliamentarians and Canadians will know where their money is going.
The main estimates that apply to my department. As the employer and expenditure manager for the government, the Treasury Board Secretariat is seeking Parliament's authority for $7 billion in planned spending. Les principales demandes du SCT sont les suivantes.
The main asks of the TBS are as follows: $259 million for Vote 1 of the department program expenses, $30 million for the 3 budget implementation votes, credits 45, 50, and 55, in order to allow gender equality and to make sure that public servants are paid, and to support those amendments having to do with the
votes relate to the role of Treasury Board ministers as the employer and financial manager for the government. $750 million in TB Vote 5, government contingencies for urgent or unforeseen expenditures that cannot be covered by other departmental votes. $327 million in Treasury Board Vote 10, government-wide initiatives. This supports horizontal initiatives like the Early Learning and Childcare Initiative, a liquefied natural gas investment in Kitimat, the implementation of the new Accessible Canada Act, and the implementation and administration of the proactive pay equity legislation. $2.7 billion is TB Vote 20, public service insurance. $2.2 billion in TB Votes 25 and 35 are for operating and capital budget carry-forwards, and $600 million in TB Vote 30 is for pay list requirements like maternity and parental allowances and severance pay. So in conclusion, Mr. Chair, in our system of government, the ability of parliamentarians to hold the government to account is of the utmost importance. And to that end, we've made important improvements to the main estimates over the past 2 years to do just that. The effect is to highlight new government spending so parliamentarians and Canadians can scrutinize the expenditure of tax dollars in greater detail. I thank you to the committee and the chair again for the invitation to appear today, and I'll be pleased to take questions from the committee.
Thank you very much. We'll go now into questions. Before I do, I'll just have to make notice that Mr. Peterson's name is not on the speakers list, which is probably just as well, since he made some comments in the last session. Then had he attempted to speak now, he would have found out he would have been invisible to the chair. We will now start then with 5-minute rounds. Madame Ratanzi, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. He didn't pick on Mr. Nicholson, though. Thank you, Minister, for
picking on poor Mr. Nicholson.
Okay, my time. Thank you, Minister, for being here, and welcome, because this is your first meeting that you've been here. You've been part of this process where we were trying to align the budget and the main estimates. And in doing so, when the government tried to do it, from a reconciliation perspective, it put in a vote 40, a one-time vote. And there were challenges to it because it was assumed that from a governance perspective, it was not the right thing to do because only one committee, which is ours, was able to review the vote 40. And I know that the government has listened and made changes. So could you tell us going forward, what are some of the changes and how are you continuing to improve the accountability and transparency so that we as MPs can understand the system or the spending?
Well, thank you, Madame Ratanzi, for the question. And I would thank you for raising the topic of the budget implementation vote from last year, which I saw as a step forward from what we had before. So before, we had the situation where the estimates were tabled, the budget was tabled afterwards, so the estimates had no relation to the decisions that were being made by government through the budget as to what would be added to spending for the year. That was the disconnect that you as a committee were aiming to improve. It was improved upon by the budget implementation vote by taking all of those budgetary items and putting them in one budget implementation vote so that which was broken down by the departmental and program intention for those funds so that it could be tracked online, the monthly tracking of when those funds were actually approved by Treasury Board and forwarded to the departments. The concerns that the committee had were very valid, that this was not going far enough. It was an important first step, but we needed to do more, and so that's exactly what Treasury Board did this year, is took those funds that were the budgetary funds, broke them into the individual departments' allocations, named what program they were for, so they are not discretionary funds for that department. They were targeted to a purpose that is outlined in the budget, and those funds are now scrutinized by the appropriate committee. So from my perspective and from the perspective of Treasury Board, this is another step forward and a big one in the direction that Parliament has been asking, which is to have faster and fuller ability to follow the money and be able to be accountable to Canadians in terms of government spending.
And thank you for that. When we look at the pillars that we were looking at for the budget and the estimate process, we looked at Pillar 4 as well. And in your departmental plans, you talked about the Pillar 4 being the departmental plans being tabled the same day as the main estimate. How are departments managing this new process? What are some of the challenges and what are some of the opportunities you see?
Well, thank you for that question. I'll take a crack at it, and because the officials with me are the ones that really had to wrestle with that, I'll turn it over to them as well. One of the concepts here is that the departmental plans need to also align with the budget in terms of the parliamentarians' ability to understand what's planned. The challenge is that when there was only a few weeks between the tabling of the budget and the tabling of estimates and departmental plans, not all of that spending, planned spending, could be incorporated in the departmental plans. However, what the departments did is they very quickly worked to complete their plans, and they tabled supplemental pages to bring it to full alignment. And in fact, that full alignment was in place before any of the committees were examining the estimates and the departmental plans. So that is another piece of the puzzle, as you mentioned, Pillar 4 of reporting and information. So if the...
Unfortunately, comprehensive as your answer was, there's no time left for any additional commentary by your officials. We'll now go to Mr. Nicholson for 5 minutes, please. Mr. McCauley? Mr. Nicholson?
Yeah, whatever works. No, I'm going first, sorry.
Okay.
Don't be sorry. You guys might be sorry. Minister, welcome to your first official meeting with us. Last summer, the government stripped away seniority rights from veterans working in the public service. We asked why.
Well, thank you to the member, to Mr. McCauley, for that question. And I think specific dollar implications for specific departments are probably most fully answered at the committee that studies the departmental plans and the estimates for Veterans Affairs. If there is an answer that my officials can give on that, I'm sure they'd be happy to.
I would love to hear why your government stripped from our veterans who've served this country, some wounded, put their lives on the line, returned, got a job. It's not drama for people who have served this country, Ms. Ratansi. They came back and served and received a job with the public service that this government stripped away their seniority rights.
Well, thanks for
I'd love
that
to hear.
question. I'm not. I see that there will be some information on that, and in the context of the question being from a member of the government that cut the budget for Veterans Affairs and shut the offices to support
Minister,
them, it seems
your government
very
stripped seniority rights from valued veterans working for the public service, and you're blaming it on a previous government for cutting costs? Please answer the question. Why would your government strip seniority rights from veterans working in the public sector?
Turn it over to Mr. Purvis.
Yeah, I think this is an issue that we can come back to and answer with the clerk.
Are you serious? This requires a written answer? Okay.
Require at least his estimation written answer.
Perfect.
So we
I'll
should
move on.
on.
Next
And
question.
I think there's certain committees that are charged with answering certain questions. And
well, we heard in this committee from someone from Treasury Board just a couple weeks ago that in June 2018 they stripped seniority rights from veterans serving in the public service. But if you need to get back to us, that's fine. We'll move on. It's been reported in the negotiations with the public sector, we've increased the wage increase offer from 0.75% up to 1.5% per year over the length of the contract. Can you let us know in wages and in benefits total how much this will cost per year, please?
Are you referring to the current set of collective bargaining?
Yep.
So we don't bargain in public. That bargaining is underway right now, and so Mr. McCauley,
been
I'm
announced
happy
in the
to let you
paper.
know that there have been over 140,000 public servants whose bargaining agents have reached tentative agreements on Phoenix
That's wonderful.
damages
What I'm
with our
asking,
government.
maybe Mr. Purvis
And
has
there
the
has
answer because
been-
you don't, but what will the cost be? It was publicized. The government even announced it. So it's not, you bargained in public by announcing it. It was in the Ottawa Citizen. You increased the wage offer from 0.75. And I'm not criticizing the wage offer. I'm just asking a simple question. What will the cost be in wages and in benefits? You moved it from 0.75 to 1.5 What will the cost be?
Well, we have not concluded the collective bargaining. We're pleased to say that it is going well, and it has been a good faith bargaining process, and we have over 30,000 public servants whose agents have
Is it something perhaps you can get
tentative
back to the
agreements with
committee
our
with?
government, and beyond that, I'm not free to divulge details of the collective bargaining.
The Phoenix offer to address a lot of the issues that the public service has suffered under Phoenix. I think it was like 3 to 5 days, vacation days. What will the cost be for that, please?
I'll see whether we have well, actually, we don't have a conclusion to those negotiations either. So
I realize
what we have is 146,000
I realize most have
public
accepted and
servants.
PSAC has
Tentative
not.
agreements, not all yet ratified. But what I will say is that no public servant should be having to go without proper pay.
Minister, we
and
realize
we're
that,
doing
but you would have
everything
had
we
to come
can
up with
to
a
make
cost
sure.
when you made the offer.
Just a minute, please. I mean, number one, we can't, and I won't be docking any time for this, but we can't simply have both witnesses and questioners speaking at the same time. I have been listening carefully. Mr. McCauley has asked a couple of direct questions. Minister, I think it would be beneficial as a committee if we could get direct answers as opposed to corollaries as to the question that posed. Mr. McCauley, if I am hearing correctly, and if I recall correctly, has asked a couple specific questions about what would the cost be of the contracts that have already been announced. Just what would the cost be? And if the costs are not available to you at this point in time, I think this committee would appreciate a written answer so this committee has the information that it has been asking.
Okay,
now, with that, we'll go back to Mr. McCauley. You've got about a minute left, sir.
I'll rephrase the Phoenix question. Obviously, when you made the offer, Treasury Board would have had to come up with costs. You would not throw out an offer to 320,000 public servants without having a cost in mind. The offer that was made to the public service unions, what was the cost behind the compensation for them enduring the Phoenix problems?
So I'm happy to thank you very much, and it is a very important question. We do take it very seriously. There are two impediments to providing the information to you at this point, and the reason why we will provide the information to you in writing. The first is, well, the agreements are tentative; they are not yet ratified. It is because they are not yet ratified; they have no legal status. It's been the common practice of all governments to hold off final communication, including pricing, until the agreements are fully ratified. That's with those with whom we have reached tentative agreements. Secondly, we remain in negotiation, and frankly, that information may have commercial value relative to other bargaining agents, so we will maintain our negotiation position private for the moment.
But you went public with the offer. So back of a napkin calculations is about $800 million. Surely the government put some numbers together before you made that offer.
No, so the back of the number calculation, and I'll ask Mr. Purvis to add to this as well, may not be fully accurate because there will be a combination of costs to the government, including backfill days and a variety of other things. And obviously that information is of direct proprietal and commercial value to the government of Canada as it continues to negotiate with bargaining agents. And also, the agreements themselves are not yet concluded, and while recommended by the bargaining agents to their members, have not yet been ratified by either the members or the government or Treasury Board. Anything else to add to that?
Mr. Blakey, you have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Is it 5 or 7? Are we on a normal? It's only 5? Okay. So my questions are about changes to the presentation of the estimates. And in particular, you know, I appreciate that that at the very least now, you know, department-specific items are going to go to the appropriate committee for study. But as I have said throughout this process, I mean, one of the that doesn't mean a lot if people can't get answers to the questions that they want to ask. And I think parliamentarians want to be able to ask good and detailed questions about particularly new program approval. So it applies especially to new budget items. And I think the PBO concurs in that analysis in terms of it being good that this particular committees are now going to look at those votes, but says specifically that while these are important improvements to the process, it does not address the issue of parliamentarians voting on items which have yet to be scrutinized or refined by the Treasury Board. And further to that, if you look at GCpedia, which is a place where civil servants can go to get answers for questions they might have related to their work, the answer to the question, I don't recognize some of the budget measures, how do I have them removed from my main estimates? The response on GCpedia is, TBS worked with the Department of Finance to identify the spending measures that require appropriations. Then it goes on. Question 4, I don't agree with some of the amounts and descriptions of the budget measures. How do I have them revised in my main estimates? The answer is amounts cannot be adjusted. So then we're going to have those, it's presumably those departmental officials that are going to be reporting to those committees and having to answer questions. Clearly there's a bit of concern. One of the questions asked, question 7, is most of my organization's budget measures have not yet been approved by Treasury Board. What can I say about those measures at a committee appearance? Answer, give brief, high-level responses. Avoid referring to policy questions or program design issues that have yet to be discussed in Cabinet or Treasury Board. So, I mean, as a parliamentarian who's going to be approving funding for these new programs, you know, one of the major issues, as recognized by the Parliamentary Budget Office, is that in the old system, for all its faults, and it was not a perfect system, by the time parliamentarians were being asked to approve funding, departments had done their homework. They knew what the program was. It had gone through the kind of detailed and rigorous costing process at Treasury Board. And parliamentarians could ask questions about the program, and the answers at least existed in principle. I mean, even if parliamentarians may not have been able to get a straight answer about the program out of the minister or department official, at least you knew the answer was there. Maybe if you put the question the right way, you might be able to unearth something, or if you filed the right kind of request, either an order paper question or an access to information request, that you might get the answer. So the changes to this year's estimates notwithstanding, we're still in the position where we've moved from a system where detailed answers about what the government actually intends to do with the money existed to a system where those answers do not exist. And in fact, civil servants are asking the question, if I don't know where this money came from or how it ended up in my budget, can I get it out of there? No. What kind of answer do I give? Well, just stick to the high level stuff, because we know you don't have it figured out. You may not have even known that it was going to be in your departmental estimates. So, I mean, how as a parliamentarian am I supposed to have confidence in the revised estimates process when I know that the departments that are appearing before my committee don't actually know what they're going to be spending the money that they're asking me to approve, or they don't know how they're going to be spending the money that they're asking me to approve? And why should we accept that? So Treasury Board also has an oversight function. If departments came to Treasury Board and said, we don't yet know how we're going to spend the money, we don't know how many EFTs we're going to need, we don't know where we're going to house the space, we don't know how much of the program money is going to be used for direct transfers to Canadians because they fall into a certain category, but we got a ballpark idea of kind of what we kind of want to do, and we think this is a pretty good number, and Treasury Board approved the money, and then we'll tell you later what we did with it. We'll write you a report. We'll send it your way. And then if you have questions, the money will be out the door. It's already spent. There's no way to go back on that. But you'll know how it was spent, because once we spend it, we'll know how we're going to spend it. I mean, surely you wouldn't accept that standard at Treasury Board. Why do you think parliamentarians should accept a lesser definition of oversight?
On that note, as I always advise members of the committee when they're asking questions of witnesses, that the 5 minutes, in this case 5-minute allocation for time, is for both the question and the answer.
I'd be happy to get it in writing.
We will ask, as I always do, since we have completely no time left in that 5-minute intervention, I think you have a good strong sense of what Mr. Blakey was asking, and we would ask you as departmental officials to please respond to that as quickly as possible in writing through our clerk for the benefit of our committee. Now we'll go on to our next intervention, which will be Mr. Johari for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, welcome. Department officials, welcome as well. Minister, I want to go to the topic that was quite a hot debate on the previous sessions that we had with Mr. Quattro. And I want to talk about the next generation HR and pay system. in budget 2018, the PBS request is about 16 million. In 2019, you're requesting about 25 million. Two questions. Can you give us an idea, an update on where we are in the process of coming up with the next generation, and how was the 16 expand, and how do you plan to spend the 25? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. And I'll just start by saying that we have a very unfortunate situation with the Phoenix pay system, and my empathy is with everyone who's been affected by that, and we're working very hard to negotiate damages compensation for our public servants who are the best in the world. So the next generation pay system comes out of our commitment to replace the Phoenix system that is just not fit for its purpose. So it's been a very different way of moving forward. I will ask the officials to talk about exactly how the money is being expended, but what I can say that we are using a methodology of the process of investigating how to replace the Phoenix pay system is one that is really focused on the user. In other words, the people whose work will be paid through the system are involved in the consultations. We've had consultations right across the country. We've involved other pay experts, and we're doing this in a staged approach so that we can test out and pilot particular potential software as a service solutions to pay, and so it's a very different approach than deciding, as the previous government did, that they wanted to cut spending and they wanted to reduce the number of civil servants, and therefore they would launch a pay system that wasn't suitable or ready. So we're doing it differently, and as to how the money is being spent, I'll ask.
So the allocations for the next generation are up to $16 million over 2 years. We're working our way through the balance of that funding. At this point, we have not required additional or extra funds to be expended on the next generation project. As the minister indicated, the next generation project starts from a fundamentally different place, and we are exploring the potential for software solutions, software as a service, to allow us to use essentially boilerplate or built-in, already proven software generally available from the private sector and apply that into the context of the government of Canada. In so doing, we are very conscious of the lessons learned from the Phoenix challenges, and particularly from the Auditor General's report, and noting that this is not just about software selection, but about the application of that software into a very different system. So we will make sure that there are pilot projects and a variety of other things. So there are critical differences, including a focus on user experience, but also a focus on making sure that we have an opportunity for thorough and rigorous pilot projects before we attempt to roll out a software solution.
So would you say that majority of the 16 million is being spent on the consultation and looking at different options?
That is correct. So the majority of the $16 million that is being spent up to this point has been spent working our way through an initial exploration process to determine the types of software vendors who would be available to meet our needs. So that will be both a need definition process, but also a process in which we essentially challenge software vendors in a gated process to demonstrate that they are able to meet the needs of the Government of Canada, and those needs relate not only to a pay module, but to a full HR continuum, HR to pay continuum. So a broader software challenge than Phoenix, but we've asked a number of vendors to work their way through that process and had good cooperation so far from the public service, the private sector vendors, bargaining agents, and others as well.
Okay, thank you. I got about 15 seconds. I'll yield that to the chair.
Time. Thank you very much. Mr. Nicholson, you're up for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Congratulations, Minister, on your new appointment here. It's not easy, you know, that to all the different aspects of it, and it's huge, and certainly it's a large responsibility. I want to get back to one of the the questions raised by my colleague here, Mr. McCauley. And my background on this is that during the Victoria Day week, I met with a man, a public servant, and he told me that he had been a veteran. He had been in the armed forces, I think he said about 9 or 10 years. And he's now been a couple of years with in the public service. And he tells me that now he doesn't get credit for the 9 or 10 years he was in the military. And it makes a difference. I mean, your responsibility, or the responsibility of the government, is everything from pay equity and making sure we know how to where the money is getting spent. And he said he's not given credit for that, and it makes a difference for him in terms of he has a seniority within the public service. Let's say it's 10 years or 15 years. You might get an extra week's vacation. You might get, there are benefits. And I wasn't quite aware of this decision that apparently I've been told since the Treasury Board approved it, and you've probably approved a lot of things, but this is just one component of it. But we want to do what we can, and everybody talks about we want to do what we can to support the people in our military and our veterans, and we can get into, criticisms as who did what, when, and all that kind of thing. But it seems to me that this is something important, that we should do what we can to support those members of our military who have retired and go in. And so what I'm hoping that you'll do is you'll have a look at this, and and again, I think you would probably get unanimous consent among all political parties, or something, if this was reversed and say, yeah, okay, if you've served in Canada's military, that yes, that should be credited towards your public service. And so I'm asking, or suggesting this not in a way to, we can spend all our time criticizing each other, but I think you would agree, and I bet if I, canvass people around the table, that they would say, yeah, if you've served in the military, that yes, you should be credited, that yet you should get this benefit. And so I'm hoping, I think Mr. Purvis, you said you were going to be looking into this, or maybe you've gotten some notes on that. But again, it's kind of stuck out in my head when I met with somebody about this, because first of all, when he said this, I said, no, we always for our military people, we want to accommodate them. We want to give them credit for that, but there is a challenge here, and so I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you for your kind remarks about my appointment, Mr. Nicholson, and also I want to say that I completely share your view that we want to do everything that we can to support the men and women in uniform and those who have left our Canadian Armed Forces and our veterans. The matter that you're referring to is subject to negotiation. It's a negotiated decision between bargaining agents representing the people in question and the former military. So this is the Public Service Commission would be the place that would be leading that negotiation, and that would be the organization that could answer your question as to that negotiation.
Having said that, we will communicate with the Public Service Commission, make sure they are aware of the sensitivity, and if we can provide appropriate information to this committee, as my colleague Mr. Purvis suggested, we will absolutely undertake to do so.
I appreciate that, because as I say, I don't see what any downside is if it's the union that's negotiating this, or the government, or the Canadian people who want to support these things. It's not contentious, in that sense.
Couldn't agree more. And the reason we were unable to answer the earlier question fully, because this is an area which we are not seized of the details, and because of that we can only take the question as notice and come back, but we obviously take the question seriously. In the interim, since the initial question was asked, we've received a note that this is something from another department, the Public Service Commission, but we will undertake to review that, make the Public Service Commission aware of the concerns of this committee, and if we are in a position to provide you with appropriate information, we will absolutely do so, and we respect and we'll follow up on the question, and absolutely agree with the policy intent behind the question from both Member McCauley and from you, sir.
Just if I may give an extraneous comment to that without going into a high level of detail, as I'm sure you're aware, Minister, that this committee has been studying the hiring of veterans in the public service. It's been an excellent study so far. I obviously won't get into detail because all those discussions have been held primarily in camera, although some have been in public. But we will be coming out with a report to be tabled in Parliament, hopefully before we rise for the summer, which will contain in it a number of recommendations. I won't again go into any of those because of some confidentiality that we've had in our discussions, but I would encourage you, Minister, and your government to take a really hard look at this report when it is tabled, and I would suggest that you would have full unanimity around this table if the government enacted and approved many of the recommendations that are going to be contained in that report. So with that, we'll go to Mr. Drouin for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I know the Minister looks forward to reading that report, and hopefully, Tom, we will work with you to ensure that you can present that report in Parliament in time, so...
He will never be invisible to me.
I wouldn't expect no less. Minister, your department and you and your predecessor have pushed on a digital government strategy, and I'm just wondering if you could give our committee an update. And at the same time, I know there was a conference last week about an open government partnership international summit, and I was hoping that you could provide some context into what the objectives were and sort of what the outcomes were at that conference as well.
Well, thank you very much for that question, and that is a very important part of my mandate. Digital is about improving services to Canadian citizens. I mean, that's the bottom line. And we're part of the what was the D9? It may be more digital countries that are banded together, but there were 9 last time I heard, to share information and best practices and new ideas as to how to move forward to improve services to citizens. So the Open Government Partnership is almost a parallel initiative, and that is a group of countries, over 80 countries, that have signed on to a partnership to improve and increase citizens' access to their government. Now, why is that important? It's important because by having access to government data, people can use that data to solve problems or to create apps or businesses and serve and grow the economy. By having access, by having government be open to citizens, they can be involved in decision making. They can be consulted so that better decisions get made. And when governments are more open and providing their data openly and consulting, what happens is a stronger level of trust between citizens and their government. In some countries in this partnership, it has been a means of reducing corruption, because once the data is out there, then people can press their government to actually flow the funds that were supposed to have flowed to a particular initiative, like a maternal health clinic was one of the examples that came up. So it's a very powerful tool for trust, so that, and having better decisions made and superior outcomes in terms of the government's delivery of services. And I think lastly, what I would say is that trust is about strengthening democracy as well. So as the digital world gets much more sophisticated, that's a good thing. But at the same time, we're seeing that it can be exploited or abused for negative purposes, ones that divide people and create opportunities that undermine democracy. And so we have to. So open government is also about addressing that and finding ways to strengthen democracies and inoculate against the kinds of attacks on democracies that we've been seeing that use digital as a way to do it.
Mm-hmm. And I just on a personal basis, I want to congratulate you for your new role. Although you have been in your new role for quite some time now, but I certainly miss you not being here anymore. But I'm getting used to Mr. Fergus now.
She looks better and better, doesn't she?
we've often talked about digital government and having the aspiring to, and we've heard this before, sort of what Estonia has done with their citizens. For example, I know in Estonia, I think citizens get a notice on their cell phones or on their whichever pick their devices, but they get a notice when governments are sharing information about them. Is that something that you see in the future that Canada could aspire to? And I know we're a lot more complex than the Estonian government, but do you think that that's something, the vision that we could aspire to?
Hopefully it will be an aspirational comment about
Yes.
20 seconds in length.
So, well, absolutely, but in the Canadian way, because we have a federation and we have provinces and territories, and so there is already work being done to work with a trial province to have to coordinate some digital identification with the province's digital identification. So yes, we want to move forward on that. We're going to do it very carefully and hand in hand with our provincial partners.
Thank you very much. Our final 5-minute intervention will be back to Mr. Nicholson.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your comments and your inputs here today. I want to get back to a subject that we raised with your counterpart, Minister Qualtrough, and that's with respect to the Privacy Act. As you, I'm sure, are aware, that personal information under the control of a government institution shall not, without the consent of the individual to whom it relates, be disclosed by the institution except in accordance with this section. I'm quite concerned about a number of incidents that have taken place over the last number of months, and some of them have gotten a lot of publicity, and the Norman, the trial of Admiral Norman, and the information that gets released. I was concerned, for instance, that I was a member of a group that gave advice to the government with respect to the appointment of a Supreme Court of Canada justice, and the leakage of this information about different individuals, I think, was a concern to everyone. And it's almost like it's hard to pick up the paper and not see something else. I see, and I mentioned this to your colleague here, that well, it says, last week the Office of Innovation Minister Navdeep Bains alerted Irving that Globe and Mail journalists had asked that the department whether an investment in an Alberta French fry plant was counted as toward an industrial benefit requirement. But this continuous leakage, I mean, in a sense, it undermines people's confidence in our system, and there is legislation that makes it, an offense to release any information. And I'm just wondering how concerned you are about this, and what is being done. I asked Minister Qualtrough, and they said that she sent out a message to them that they can't be doing this kind of stuff, releasing all this information. But I think it perhaps goes beyond that. It's a greater concern.
Well,
your thoughts?
My thoughts. Thank you for raising that. Privacy is a key principle in becoming part of when we signed up to the D9, the Digital 9. I was actually at the signing ceremony for the D7 in New Zealand, and one of the key themes was privacy. Privacy, as well as digital justice, so inclusion. So those kinds of things are very key to international and national discussions in the open government and the digital initiatives going forward. I mean, in an era of digital, it becomes even more critical to protect citizens' privacy. So that's the kind of dynamic tension one has with openness, is that you have to also at the same time be protecting individual privacy. We're very seized with that. It is a part of the data charter that our government's put forward. Our Ministry of Treasury Board Secretariat is working on artificial intelligence principles. So any of the departments that are working with AI, that it is responsible AI, and that is also about protecting the privacy of personal information. So that's a fundamental principle.
And I'll just supplement that very briefly from a Treasury Board official's perspective. There are a number of different aspects of privacy, but I'll speak to two of them very briefly. The first is technical, and technical requirements and technical standards and technical risks around privacy are changing rapidly as we transition from a server-based to a cloud environment and other things. And Treasury Board is taking a leadership role in trying to ensure that the privacy of Canadian, the information that government collects, is as secure as it can be. That is technically very difficult, very challenging, cutting-edge material, and we hope to get that right, but it's an ongoing and significant challenge for us, working with other departments and other governments. As well, we have, and you were referring to these directly in your question, behavioral aspects. So we try and make sure through the use of internal audit and our regular other functions that we have a good understanding of what data we have or information we have that would fall under the protection of privacy principles, and make sure that individuals and teams within the Treasury Board Public Service are aware of their legal requirements, their oath of office, to protect the integrity of that information and take that information seriously. There's both a knowledge and a behavioral aspect of ensuring that we follow up on that on a consistent basis.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry we're out of time, Mr. Nicholson. Minister, once again, thank you and your officials for being here with us. I know you had to extend your or at least alter your calendar somewhat to be here with us, so I do sincerely appreciate that. And colleagues, thank you all for being here. Our normal meeting time, as you know, is between 3:30 and 5:30, so to sit here until 6:30 to hear the testimony was much appreciated by the chair. And colleagues, we are adjourned.